On October 4th, the affluent Ushiromiya family had a conference like any other year. Unfortunately, little Anji Ushiromiya wasn't able to go due to having contracted an illness. Furthermore, the familial festivities were interrupted by a sudden typhoon that hit the island and trapped the family indoors, extending their stay. That being said, the family still had a merry time, weather aside. The cousins had fun and some groundbreaking truths were revealed. When the seagulls cried, not a single soul had died. Umienko no Naku Koro is a mystery, one with many layers of narrative and stories within stories. It dares the reader to think and engage in its material, to search for a greater truth among potential truths. At the end, there are many things left unstated, many elements of the narrative left in the hands of the reader to dissect and move together to form their own truth. How exactly did the murders occur? Who was the culprit? How many were involved? What is the history that binds everyone, hidden just beneath the surface? These are all questions that do have answers. They can be reasoned out with the tools Ryukishi has provided us with. But perhaps Umieko's greatest trick it pulls on the audience is this. None of these questions actually matter. All of these questions serve the same ends. They exist to find out what exactly happened in Umienko no Naku Koro, putting aside completely the much more valuable question of how did Umienko no Naku Koro occur. Finding the culprit is an interesting thought exercise, but one that is ultimately meaningless to the message of the story, or its greater mysteries. The truth of the narrative is best understood by examining each of the many layers of the narrative being told throughout the game. In the innermost circle, we have each chapter individually. These tell the story of the Ushiromiya family on the date of October 4th, when a mysterious and potentially magical force invades Rokkenjima and inevitably begins a murder of the family through magical means. There's the secret of the witch to unravel, magical entities and forces to disrupt the logic of the story. Move out a layer and we see that each of the chapters is actually a message bottle, a story written either by Sayo, Toya, or an otherwise anonymous source. These all tell various stories of the Rokkenjima incident, with the first 2 episodes of Umienko being penned by Sayo, and the rest being an amalgamation of Toya's stories and details from other such forgeries. In this way, Umienko is seemingly a story within a story, one that ultimately concludes with Anji Ushiromiya concluding that pursuing the truth is irrelevant, and that what she needs in order to keep moving forward is to remember the love she had for her family and continue to believe in her own truth. Believe that one day she would be reunited with them all once more. The Ushiromiya family never looks back. By the end of episode 8, we are left with an ending that sees Anji reunite with Toya, and lets Battler finally find peace in the restored Fukuin house. We have a bittersweet ending, but one that is hopeful, or at least that's how it seems. This is where the explicit narrative ends. However, this ending leaves many questions unanswered. Among those are the questions of what that we mentioned earlier. How was the murder executed in the message bottles, and by whom? These loose ends are a frequent topic of discussion amongst many people. But this is avoiding the much bigger loose end of how. What is the Tea Party? What is Purgatorio? If the episodes are disconnected stories, penned by different authors, what exactly is the Tea Party space that binds them together? What's happening in these times that occur outside of the message bottles and give them all continuity? They can't be a part of the message bottles, as they have this continuity, and furthermore involve magical nonsense as far back as the very first episode. Who are Burncastle and Lambda Delta? If everything is just a series of forgeries and message bottles, who are these mysterious beings that are present and affecting the stories ever since the first 2 episodes? If episodes 1 and 2 are Sayo planning out potential ways to execute her revenge on the Ushiromiya family, then surely she didn't write all the magic we observe in these episodes into her story. Surely she wouldn't connect them all with this extra bit of narrative we know as the Tea Parties. But in that case, what's happening? Trying to find the culprit or discover the modus operandi of the crimes does nothing to address these nagging questions. So what is actually happening here? Simply put, there's a third level of narrative. The first layer of narrative is the content telling what occurred on October 4th's Rokkenjima incident. The second layer is the world in which these stories are actual stories, told through Sayo's message bottles and forgeries, ending in Anji becoming an author and restoring Fukuin House. The third layer is that all of this, everything including the tea parties, the magic fighting, and Anji returning to the future, is a story written by one of the characters. Umienko no Naku Koro is a story written in-universe. Stopping the narrative at the second layer would not account for the tea parties or explain who or what Burncast or Lambda Delta are. Stopping there would mean that one would have to accept the existence of Lambda, Bernie, Delanor, Willard, and all the other illusions as real existences, as seen in the 8th episode's Tea Party, as well as all the connecting tissue between episodes. In order for all of this to make sense, for the continuity between episodes to be understood cohesively, we have to go a layer back. Much of the existence of the illusions can be accredited to Anji and her debating with herself and pulling over her ideas while on top of the roof. But that doesn't cover or explain the existence of Burncastle and Lambda Delta in the first episodes, or explain Battler's arc with Beatrice and the Tea Party. If the story is simply Anji's internal reasoning, then it doesn't explain the importance of Battler and his arc making amends with Beatrice, and if it isn't in Anji's head, then what is it? Simple. These scenes, the tea parties, and all the events in Purgatorio, are also being penned by a person. The question then becomes, who is this person, and why would they be connecting the message bottles and creating this narrative filled with magic and witches in the first place? One could be forgiven for thinking that the author of this third layer story was Anji or Toya. They are, after all, the two in-universe authors within the context of Layer 2 of the story. However, neither of these options makes sense from a logistical standpoint. Simply put, there's no reason why either Anj or Toya would write this story. One of the motivators and conclusions faced in Episode 8 is that the incessant search for the truth is meaningless if it desecrates the name and memory of the family that Anji holds so dear. This culture that creates forgeries and vilifies members of Anji's family is something that she rightfully hates. So why would either her or Toya create something that draws attention to these forgeries? Furthermore, if Anji is indeed the author, what is the point of including the arc with Battler and Beatrice reuniting and making amends with each other? This would probably leave one to believe that the author is Toya then. However, that is tons of problems too. If Toya is the author, then one could understand why he included that story of Battler making amends with Beatrice, as it could be a means of coping with something he never got to do on Rokkenjima Prime. That is to say, the actual events that occurred on October 4th. However, if Toya, and by extent Battler, is the author, what is the point of including the plotline about future Anj finding the will to keep moving forward? Furthermore, what's the point of making it a mystery? If the point is just for Battler to settle his unresolved feelings, why make it a mystery that the audience has to engage with to solve? Why would he write it in such an obtuse way, filled with magic and bunny girls with guns? Neither Anji nor Toya make sense as the author if this is a story made for the public, as it would only desecrate the Uchinomiya family name. But on the other hand, it doesn't make sense as a story made for just themselves either, as it's a story told as an obtuse mystery filled with magic and girls in questionable clothing. Furthermore are the logistical problems even within Layer 2 that need addressing. If Sayo wrote the message bottles before the Rokkenjima incident, how did she know that Anj would be sick and that a typhoon would hit? How did she know that Battler would be returning? Let's assume that Kirie or Rudolph told her that Anji would be sick and that Battler would be coming back home. That would have to mean that either Anj was sick for a very long time, or that Sayo wrote these message bottles very, very close to October 4th. Something that's pretty illogical considering that she wrote many message bottles, as is described in Episode 7. And even if we just assume that Anji was really, really ill, which would question why she was left at home in the first place, but let's put that aside, how could Sayo be sure that the typhoon would hit and that they would be stuck on Rokkenjima for precisely that correct amount of time? A typhoon specifically on the date of the family conference that is absolutely necessary in order for her to execute her plan to kill everyone. How could she have predicted the actions of a man she hadn't seen in 6 years? It would make a lot more sense if Battler was acting more heroic, like how she had envisioned him as they were children. That, or perhaps more of a coward, out of resentment for leaving her behind. But no, Battler acts just as we know him to act, something that is inconsistent with Sayo's incomplete knowledge of who he is. So before we press on, let's go over a few things once more. The story cannot stop at having 2 layers, because that narrative would not account for the existence of Purgatorio or the Tea Parties, or Burncastle and Lambda Delta for that matter. there must be a third layer, making the entire story a story within yet another story. This story cannot be written by either Toya or Anji, because it would go against their own morals as a public book and is too filled with mystery and magic to make sense as simply a story told to give themselves closure. Furthermore, even within the context of the message bottles, Sayo being able to pen the first 2 episodes has plot holes regarding the details she seems to know. So that brings us to the question: who wrote the story Umienko no Naku Koro ni? Well, Battler did. Him and Sayo together. The following is the only way for all of the loose ends, documenting the how of the visual novel to come together. The backstory as we understand it leading up to the Rokkenjima incident is untouched. However, on that day, the events are not quite as we are led to believe. Battler solves the epitaph in Rokkenjima Prime. In doing so, he made up with Sayo, and that day unfolded much like the events of Episode 8. There was no murder. However, Sayo confesses to Battler her thoughts about murder and her disdain for the family that built up over the years of service, and as a coping tool, the two construct the first 2 message bottles. This acts as a way for Sayo to vent her frustrations as well as for the 2 of them to reconnect. These stories are mysteries because Battler and Sayo both love the genre and have bonded over it ever since they were children. This also explains how they knew a typhoon would hit Rokkenjima on October 4th, and how they knew that Anji wouldn't be there due to illness. Not being too serious in nature, they included magic in the meta-narrative of the Purgatorio, and references to the fictional work Higurashi no Naku Koro ni, a favorite story of Battler's. This is the origin of Lambda Delta and Burncastle. The 2 release these message bottles into the ocean, putting aside Sayo's hatred and going about their lives. But the bottles are discovered and the story of the Rokkenjima incident becomes popular fiction, even spawning copypastas in the form of the forgeries. These stories are all mysteries too, including magic and magical characters in the same style as the message bottles that Battler and Sayo originally put out. This is fine, but as time goes on, the forgeries become more intense and the truth becomes forgotten. The family members are vilified. Rosa becomes an abusive caricature, as do the rest of the siblings. Furthermore, ridiculous theories and stories become commonplace, and the truth of the matter is set aside. Eventually, Sayo and Battler cannot stand the slander and disrespect of the Ushiromiya family name, and write a mystery to trump them all. This mystery is Umienko no Naku Koro ni, a novel the 2 write together that links the stories of their original message bottles and some of the notable forgeries, adding in Burncastle and Lambda Delta to all versions of the Rokkenjima incident, as well as a continuity to the stories in the form of the tea parties. What we read in the visual novel is this novel that the 2 write together. Toya does not exist, as Battler didn't get into an accident and Rokkenjima never blew up. The title is a reference to Higurashi, which both of them love. The 2 craft this novel to be the greatest mystery ever, a testament to their love of the genre, as well as a critique of the culture of people desecrating the Ushiromiya name and spitting on everyone's memory. The message being that hope is vital to moving forward, and that the truth is not always the most important thing. Anji is a recurring main character, as she was a point of interest in the forgery culture, given that she was never on Rokkenjima Prime due to her illness. In this way, Furudu Erika and the Goats are commentary on the audience and culture surrounding the forgeries. In the end, while her intellectual raping and aggressions are frowned upon, Battler and Sayo still acknowledge the value of the detective spirit, hence Battler's final confrontation with the girl in Episode 8. At the end of the last episode, Beatrice laments her thousands of years of sins. This is the guilt Sayo feels for having created the message bottles in the first place, and creating this culture of forgeries. In that scene, Battler soothes her, assuring her that any sin that she carries, he shares with her, for it was him that forced her hand. The 2 had written the message bottles together, and share the blame of the aftermath. The ultimate purpose of this novel is to let the story of Rokkenjima, the rabid culture surrounding it, finally rest. The story written by Battler and Sayo is not desecrating the dead, as no one actually died on October 4th. There's cause for its genre to be a mystery, as Battler and Sayo are composing it out of passion and challenge. Lambda Delta and Burncastle have a clear and obvious reason to exist in the narrative. The inconsistencies of the Sayo message bottles suddenly make sense. They were written as a coping tool after or while the family conference was going on. The themes all make sense with the literal events of the story, and the Ushiromiya name is protected. Distorting and mutilating the identity and ideals of the members of the Ushiromiya family is masturbatory and insulting, because without love, the truth cannot be seen. That truth is that the Ushiromiya family, while at times contentious, is still one that loves each other, and is one where sins can be forgiven and everyone can walk towards the future. There is no revenge. There is no murder. Simply put, there is no Rokkenjima incident. Thank you.